Hello there, kia ora. Welcome to this week's Omnibus video. It's a collection of all the videos that I've done throughout the week. So if you saw those, I guess you don't have to rewatch this again, but if you want to, you're more than welcome to. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, tell everybody about what's going on and follow along. And if you're really bored, jump over into the communities tab because I think I've got a poll going or a quiz or something like that. I try and do something a little bit different to end the week on, and it has been a very strange week. It started off with a video about an angry mayor who decided that because Blake had been talking to Labour and Green Party MPs that he decided to ring up and threaten him when there was absolutely no need to do that. He wasn't particularly complimentary about the video that we made about him either, so he decided to ring Blake up again and threaten him again. Such a stand-up local body politician, I guess. And then it ended with what was essentially a speed run of just all the crazy from the week before, and it seems to be a video I'm able to do every week because that happens, but this weekend is kind of quiet because this weekend is Smugfest 2024. The National Party are having their annual conference in South Auckland where they're there crowing about how amazing they are and how much they're helping people with their absolutely massive tax cuts, which is what Sunday's video is actually about, how tax cuts are impacting senior citizens and the disabled community. That Blake's done this one because obviously it impacts him a little bit more than it would impact me. I've got a few grey hairs, but I definitely don't fall into that senior citizen category yet. So yeah, feel free to sit down and watch the whole lot, or go and watch them individually, entirely up to you. But as I said, feel free to share with everybody and jump over to that communities tab. Other than that, enjoy the show, and I'll catch you. Hello there, kia ora. Look, I'm going to keep this one really simple for editing purposes, mostly, because it's been a busy weekend. And I'm going to let Blake do most of the talking on this one. He's going to tell you a tale about one of the people he reached out to in his campaign to help reduce the reductions that this government put in place over whaikaha. And this is a hell of a doozy of a reaction from somebody who's no longer in office. But I'll be back afterwards to tell you who it was that he's talking about and to show you a really fascinating clip that surfaced during the 2022 local body election. Because, yeah, it's a bit weird. But because this is going to be a video that might make you angry or upset or just not impressed, I'm going to show you something really impressive. This is a cake that looks like a dragon. It's cake. This was at the food show. It makes me happy. I hope it makes you happy. I could never eat a cake like this because of the sugar and it's so beautiful. But I figured this was a nice way to get people in a good mood before I hand it over to Blake and he tells you a story that's not particularly fun.
Hello there, Blake here. Over the weekend, I started to feel a bit better. So I decided that I felt well enough to do a few versions of copying and pasting my letter that I have been sending to government and local council officials while I felt a bit better. So I copied and pasted it to a few different people while I had the energy. One of those people who Paul will name in a minute was a former mayor of South Wairarapa. Now here's a few facts of what happened. I contacted this former mayor like I normally would any former or current elected official, and sent an email version and a text message version providing both of those contact details are available. I decided to contact who I would later find out would be the former mayor with my text version and email version of my message. He replied that he wasn't interested, but not in such a polite way, saying that he disapproved of Labour's and the Greens and didn't want to be a part of anything involving them, and that was fine. No problem with that, because everyone has their own political views and political opinions, so we respect that. So I apologized to him for bothering him and thought nothing more of it. Later that afternoon/morning, I get a telephone call from his number. I pick up the number, introduce myself as speaking. He proceeds to go on a rant for 30 seconds to tell me that I should stop spamming people with text messages and emails about my campaign to see if they would be interested, and hope that I enjoyed hanging out, describing the Green Party as hippie green flowers, and hoped that I enjoyed naming Labour the other people. And he proceeded to threaten me and tell me that he would recommend that people stay clear of me, Paul and others, and not join the campaign, and then proceeded to hang up the phone. Now, the only words I got in this conversation was hello and my name speaking. The other rest were dominated by him before he hung up the phone. Now, the last part of this was I went to go and screenshot this so I could show Paul, because he's a part of the campaign, as I thought it was important. But in the time that I hung up that the phone was hung up, I went to take a screenshot of the call log and it had disappeared. So I went to see why, only to find that he had blocked me already. So that was nice. So 31.2 seconds, if you want to be pedantic, of him sharing his views. And to tell you just a little bit more about this man, and to reveal his name, he is Paul.
Oh, hey, welcome back. So Blake's talking about the former mayor of South Wairarapa, Alex Bayen. Alex was only in for one term before he was replaced at the last term. The people of South Wairarapa decided to vote in a different direction. And he's a really fascinating fellow. He actually has a really snazzy dress sense, to be fair. It kind of surprised me. I didn't know what to expect. But at the same time, well, he was very vocal against Three Waters, and he loves his loud American sports cars that have like the really big engines, and he's really passionate about the fact that all the banks are basically closed in South Wairarapa, and that's like a third largest part of the Greater Wellington area. So that's a lot of people there and a lot of space that doesn't have like direct banking services anymore. Totally get that perspective. But he was also really clear when he was an elected official about how he felt on central government politics. In fact, this is what he said.
If you were running for government, which party would you be with?
I'm not going to say, because actually as a mayor and a local official, you need to be neutral. And you need to be able to work with any party who may be in government. So when I became mayor, I suspended any involvement with any national political party.
I mean, it's quite clear now he feels he can be a lot more vocal about his perspective, and his perspective is very, very clear. And that's completely his prerogative. After all, he's no longer in a position of power, and quite clearly by saying things like this to somebody who is severely disabled when they're asking for help around sorting out funding for the disabled community, he doesn't want to be a person who's back in power at any point, or even really seen as a community leader of any sort, I guess. But that's up to him on what he wants to do in his future. Anyway, that's the video for today. We have done the whole thing. Like I said at the beginning, this is all for editing to make it super simple. I will be back tomorrow, where I'm going to have a look over what happened over the weekend while I was busy looking at cakes. Here, look at another cake. It's really awesome. Hello there, kia ora, and congratulations on a new job. I realize you're probably sitting there wondering what new job, but it turns out that if you've ever ended up in one of our hospitals or been to see a doctor, you're now technically one of the 14 layers of management that the Prime Minister said was causing Health New Zealand to overspend and had nothing at all to do with them underfunding the entire sector. I guess that also means technically it's your fault that you needed to go to a hospital that they didn't fund for medical inflation rates of around 11% or population growth of around 2% or an aging population which requires way more investment in the health sector. This week, Dr. Shane Retti's office finally provided their list of the 14 proclaimed layers of management, but it includes patients, who are clearly not Te Whatu Ora management. But it also included frontline staff like doctors, nurses, and support staff, who are also not managers. In fact, they're the ones that we were told were not going to be impacted at all by budget cuts, but they're on the list of 14 layers of management that the government wants to deal with, along with patients. But look, don't worry. Dr. Lester, I've never met a DHB I haven't been able to tank. Levy, the new commissioner for Te Whatu Ora, has promised the Prime Minister that it's absolutely too much management mush and not underfunding to the sector that's causing the problems. Which is an amazing coincidence considering that's exactly what Dr. Retti and the Prime Minister said when they announced who it was that they'd hired to be the Commissioner for Health New Zealand's board. And their evidence is actually that there are too many nurses, and that's somehow blowing budgets. But somehow, there's also not enough nurses or medical practitioners to keep the hospital emergency rooms open overnight in Northland. In fact, there are record numbers of nursing positions needing to be filled, with data from Te Whatu Ora showing that more than a quarter of shifts are currently understaffed in hospitals, and frontline staff being told that they can't pick up extra shifts and can't have any extra earnings. And heaps of the people who are migrating to New Zealand to become nurses, well, they're struggling to find placements. And while the government has promised to find ways to get more people training as nurses and staying in the country, there's still a more immediate need to get nurses in from overseas while these plans are being put through and people train. Which is actually one of the reasons why Winston Peters' recent trip to the Philippines is kind of interesting. Because while he was there, he announced that the government would be making clearer pathways for Filipino migrants with specific skill sets to get into the country. Some of those skill sets included nursing. It was actually a really big one. In fact, about 1,000 Filipino nurses a year are already coming to Aotearoa to work. And while there's certainly an irony in seeing Winston, co-governance is like Nazi Germany, two Wongs don't make a right Peters with his hands out asking for help from an Asian country, it seems that the trip may have actually encouraged some Filipino nurses to look elsewhere. The media coverage within the Philippines pointed out that he misled around how much the minimum wage was, which he claimed was almost $30 an hour, that the economy is going well, that there's plenty of work for everyone, and that we've got a very fair tax system. And that got a lot of pushback from people in the Philippines, calling him out for, well, utter bullshit. So once again, this government is misrepresenting a problem. It's refusing to acknowledge it's made mistakes, it's blaming everyone else for that problem, and finding ways to make that problem worse. For a government that claims that patients are part of the 14 layers of management they need to get rid of, I guess that's what they consider getting the health sector back on track. Hello there, kia ora. It's Tax Change Day, in case you missed the news. This is the cornerstone policy from the National Party, so naturally they're crowing about it. And to be fair, re-indexing income tax thresholds is something that probably needed to be done as average wages have increased steadily over the last number of years. But the National Party are out there pushing this like the MCU pushing the return of Robert Downey Jr. They've claimed that this is part of their battle against the cost of living crisis, and like their claims like the one that they brought down inflation, there's a lot of moving parts to this which show it's not as simple as the sound bites would have you believe. For a start, there's a lot of elements in play as to the amount someone will get beyond their annual income, like how many kids they have and the ages of those kids, or how many earners are in their household. Susan St. John from the University of Auckland pointed out to Radio New Zealand that only 5.4% of all earners in the country are going to get the full benefits of these tax cuts. But 130,000 households will get nothing, and 8,000 people are actually going to be slightly worse off. And that number is exacerbated for anyone who might have lost their job, for example, due to the economic downturn that the government has driven us into. In fact, those who'll see the least impact are those on the lower income bands, like pensioners who saw just a $2.40 increase in their pensions in this year's budget. Now, for a single person who's working on minimum wage for 40 hours a week, they'll be better off by $12.50 a week. The below rate of inflation increase to minimum wage this year of 45 cents saw them get an extra $18 a week, which means that these people will be better off by $30.50 a week compared to last year. But if Labour had won, for example, and went with the suggestion from MBIE, which they've done the last couple of minimum wage increases, well, they'd be better off by $36 a week before any tax bracket re-indexing. But since this government was elected, we've seen increases in average rents of about 5%, a tripling of interest rates, a 20% increase in the cost of insurance, variable rates increases of between 9 and 21% depending on where in the country you are, increases in the cost of things like power, fuel, car registrations, public transport, and food. We've also seen budget cuts impact our core services like hospitals and the health sector, police, road safety, ferry infrastructure, customs, and then there's funding issues for organisations like Whaikaha, mental health services, school lunches, climate response funds, Kāinga Ora, digital safety teams at Internal Affairs, sexual violence prevention at ACC, and Oranga Tamariki, children's safety team. So more people will struggle, especially those on low incomes. The extra pocket money won't have a discernible impact on their quality of life directly, and indirectly the cost of the cuts is not only detrimental to the fabric of society, the lives of New Zealanders, and inflationary because the government had to borrow more than 5 of the last 6 Labour budgets, it's also the government can justify other measures, like putting aside millions for the tobacco industry while reducing child poverty targets. I guess showing us exactly what their real priorities are. But hey, you might get $12.50 extra a week from all of this. Hello there, kia ora. Throughout history, there are many examples of politicians which have had to make a call with unexpected outcomes that they didn't want or like David Cameron and his call for the Brexit vote, which he expected to win, or the Chinese government trying to ban Winnie the Pooh. And I suspect that next year, the name Simeon Brown is going to be added to that list. You see, this week the government passed its Māori Wards Bill in Parliament, despite the overwhelming objections from councils, experts in democracy, tikanga Māori, te tiriti, and groups representing voters from marae, media outlets, law firms, the Waitangi Tribunal, and a huge raft of concerned individuals. Their views were ignored to pass through legislation that will force councils which put in place Māori wards after following their local processes and community feedback to hold a referendum in next year's local body election. This can be added to a really long growing list of what many see as attacks on Māori by this coalition. But this is one where the public will have their say next year at the local body elections, and, well, this action pretty much guarantees that they're going to achieve something that no other government has managed since 1998, an increase in voter turnout at the local body elections. And there's a better than average chance it won't go the way they think it will for the majority of councils, because this government is still pandering to the aging white boomer who thinks ACT have some good ideas and that Winston really does stand for New Zealand first, and ignoring the changing demographics of Aotearoa. Here, let me show you some really boring graphs to illustrate what I mean. And for those of you listening to this on the podcast, I guess just use your imagination. See, this is the voter turnout rate for the 2022 local body elections. As you can see, it's been in decline and has been for a number of years. 2022 had the lowest turnout since the 1989 local government reforms. And part of the reason for that is, well, there's a bit of a crossover between our aging population and who actually goes out and votes. It's not the only reason, but it is part of it. This chart shows an age breakdown of Auckland voters in 2022. The highest percentage of voters peaks at 62% for 80-year-olds. Now, Auckland's actually a really good place to look at for this because it contains a third of the country's population. So as a sample size, it's, I guess, technically really decent. But it also shows us on this graph that the lowest voting turnout was only 21% for 26 to 35-year-olds. and Māori voters' turnout is usually far lower than people not of Māori descent in local body elections. But this government's decision around Māori have already seen huge activations around the motu. On Budget Day, tens of thousands of people attended the 80 protests around the country in support of Māoridom. The number of supporters who feel the need to activate will be higher because not everyone can take the time off to attend a protest on a Thursday afternoon. On top of that, our shifting demographics highlight the power of Māori in the polling booth and the impact they can actually have on local body politics. In the 2023 census, we saw 1 in 5 people now identify as Māori, 20% of the country. The vast majority of those are under 30, so that demographic that hasn't traditionally voted in local body elections. In fact, the band with the largest percentage of Māori is the one that will be turning 18 in time for the next local body election. This is the demographic that's most likely to be able to use conversational Te Reo Māori, who best understand the meaning of Te Tiriti, most likely to know why the Te Reo version of Te Tiriti is the document that's considered our founding document, and understand the complexities of a truly unique agreement that founded this country. Now, it is important to note that no group is a monolith. There will be some Māori out there who don't support Māori wards, just like there's going to be some older white folks out there who do. But there are signs that younger people in Aotearoa are far more likely to understand the importance of being good Te Tiriti partners, and how Māori wards help with that and create a more robust decision-making process, and how that will shape a more inclusive country going forward into a future which is far less Pākehā dominated. So, at next year's local body elections, the voices of those who feel diminished and targeted by this government will have the ability to drive and justification to get involved in the process to send a clear message to this coalition, if it's still in one piece then, that they're once again on the wrong side of history. Hello there, kia ora. This week the ACT Party showed that they're not really all that dedicated to their much-touted claim of one rule for all. After all, it's a line that they use a lot, especially when trying to whitewash their more targeted policies aimed at Māori. The ball actually started rolling on this last week when National Party MP James Meagher and ACT Party MP Cameron Luxton, seen here naked as the day he was born apparently, complained about Te Pāti Māori MP Hana Rāwhiti Maipi Clark using her laptop in Parliament, having a whole bunch of logos and stickers on it. One of those is this barely visible Te Pāti Māori logo. House rules say that there should be no visible party logos on desks used by MPs, and in that discussion it was pointed out that ACT MPs wear their ACT logo on ACT lapel badges in the House. So Speaker Jerry Brownlee made a ruling afterwards that party badges are also prohibited from the House from now on. So this week, when ACT MPs wore their badges, he refused to let them speak or answer questions because they were in breach of the rules he set. The one set of rules for all in the House. Now, ACT leader David Seymour called their refusal to remove them a protest against the discrimination and bullying from other parties that they feel they get. And their view was that Brownlee wasn't taking their complaints seriously.
Yesterday I reinforced with whips and others who were at the Business Committee that the display of party logos in the House in any form is not a permitted activity. Hasn't been for some time. Question number 2, in the name of Todd Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
And I'll stop him right there. You can go ahead with your question when you've got rid of the logo.
Well, Mr. Speaker, a point of order then.
Not a point of order.
Well, I would just refer you to a ruling Speaker Mallard made in relation to pins in the House.
That's good. I made a new one yesterday. Nothing. So if you want to read if you want to deliver your question to the House, remove the pin.
Mr. Speaker, are you seriously saying that under Standing Order 90.1 you are going to kick a member out of the House for being highly disorderly for wearing a lapel pin?
No, it would be for challenging the chair or the Speaker, which is quite a different matter, as has been pointed out by others in the House already today.
like the ACT MP wasn't the one who started the whole issue around logos, and their party isn't one of the strongest voices in the coalition specifically targeting anything that sees a positive outcome for Māori. And his confidence in Brownlee was apparently going downhill. So it's okay for the ACT party to call out other parties, but not to be called out for not following the rules. It's almost like what they actually mean is our rules for all, not one rule for all.
Well, you're asking the Parliament to make a judgment.
Well, I'm asking
You're asking the Parliament to accept your judgment, in which case I certainly don't.
We also saw this attitude pop up, though, with claims of bullying from Karen Shower, who is finding it very stressful at the moment in Parliament because she feels, well, personal attacks against her during debates around removing the highly effective Section 7AA of the Oranga Tamariki Act are workplace bullying, while also claiming her personal experiences are actually part of the driver for the changes she's the figurehead behind. Now, Parliament is tough at times. It can feel brutal for those under pressure, and there should be absolutely zero tolerance for people who bully and belittle others in Parliament or any workplace. Which is why it's kind of depressing to see Karen here as one of the MPs laughing at recent comments made by the Deputy Prime Minister using a slur that denigrates disabled people. For someone so impacted by the words used in Parliament, you'd think she would be more aware of why laughing at something like that, which is hurtful to others, is probably not the best course of action. For 92% of the voting population, ACT crying foul when they're treated the way they treat others is no surprise. This is a party, after all, that claims that Māori shouldn't get special treatment or extra resourcing to help achieve better outcomes. But charter schools, which are given better government-funded resourcing and special treatment compared to public schools to get better results, is absolutely fine. But this coalition has always been, well, an uneasy threesome, and everyone knows how easily it could break apart if one of the party leaders threw a tantrum about not getting what they wanted and walked away. Especially the Prime Minister. Considering later this month we're expected to find out why former ACT Party President Tim Yago suddenly resigned, we can be pretty sure we're going to keep seeing these distractions. So, expect to keep seeing these double standards pop up. Expect to keep seeing the PM ignore the behaviours and say things like, that's an issue for their party. And keep expecting to see a party that only got 8% of the vote exert disproportionate influence on the future of this country. Hello there, kia ora. I was trying to work out which piece of news to do a video on today, since I really am spoilt for choice, like I have been for the last number of months since this government was elected. I had stories to choose from like Ngāpuhi leaders walking out in protest from a meeting with the Prime Minister over his actions towards Māori, or Hutt Hospital doctors having to make beds and clean sinks and answer phones due to staff shortages that the government tells us totally aren't an issue, or that the Ministry of Education got told the government that its plans for splitting up the Polytech merger was a really bad idea, that the massive cuts to social services, including support structures in place for Oranga Tamariki, you know, the very definition of frontline services that we were told weren't going to be cut to pay for those tax cuts for landlords and the wealthy, or more hospitals struggling to staff overnight emergency rooms, Todd McClay making comments deriding Ricardo Menendez March's birthplace, the $216 million in tax money that was put aside for tobacco companies, the response to the removal of the Māori wards, and all the very, very many groups and individuals calling it out for its blatant racism, but as well a whole bunch of really right-wing councillors and local body authorities arguing that it's a good thing, actually, because it means a return to one person, one vote, which has never been something that is actually in place for Māori wards, but is in place for people who own multiple properties in multiple areas, and that doesn't seem to be something that they're arguing against. Then there was the stalling of the national rollout for bowel cancer screening programs, the cutting of funding and staff for a Kāinga Ora Māori housing team, the continued outcry around the removal of Section 7AA from the Oranga Tamariki Act, and how that's been handled by the MP in charge. There's the claims of racial harassment from the party doing everything it can to belittle Māori and worsen their outcomes across every measurable metric. There's ACT's continued meltdown with the Speaker over pins and things that they were told not to wear. There was Shane Jones putting out a weird video about downsizing the Waitangi Tribunal before getting rid of it completely. There was a record drop in housing consents to the lowest level in 5 years. There was Te Whatu Ora having to apologise to nurses that they offered positions to and then rescinded. Oh, and the Minister of Health saying if it costs money, they can't do it. Like our health system has to MacGyver its way into fixing itself. Oh, there was the first intake of youth offenders at the boot camp, days after that report into state abuse saying that boot camps are a major driver for the reason for the report. Oh, and tax cuts were rolled out where 130,000 people got nothing and 8,000 people were worse off. But the Prime Minister made a funny TikTok about it where he gets splashed, so yay. And the Herald would love you to know that this is actually a good thing. Oh, then there's the fact that Health NZ dropped the controversial ethnicity factor in the waiting list allocations. I call it controversial mostly because some angry racists said it was bad without seeing that it was actually one of about a dozen factors that had an incredibly small impact on list allocation, but had better outcomes for Māori and Pacifica people. But all of that was actually knocked out when our Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister decided he hadn't been getting enough angry headlines lately, and David Seymour had. So he tweeted about a women's boxing match at the Olympics to the screeches of his new Cooker voting base. Maybe he's hoping to pick up a few of those New Zealand loyal voters after Liz Gunn shut down her party without telling her followers, and then bunked off with thousands of dollars worth of donations for a really, really deeply needed retreat. He jumped on the culture war frenzy, claiming a trans woman had an unfair advantage in a match that lasted 46 seconds. Despite the fact that the athletes were both born female and have always identified as female, despite the fact one of them being misgendered by the rabid crowds comes from one of the most regressive countries in the world for LGBT rights, and they would never allow a trans athlete to represent them, and that the other athlete was really clear in that her reason for quitting the match was about the shock of the impact and a punch to the face and not a protest. Our Deputy Prime Minister decided to add to the voices of angry, wrong, nasty, pathetic individuals getting their facts wrong and being so transphobic they start attacking a biological woman because she doesn't conform to their idea of what a woman should look like. And now he's trying to make it about the New Zealand First bathroom police policy. But on top of that, he represents Aotearoa New Zealand on the international stage. He's our Foreign Affairs Minister. And comments like this make us as a country look bad. Well, to everyone except the worst people on the internet. And while I know most of us know that they're horrible, this is who our government panders to now. It emboldens the racists, the TERFs, the homophobes, the racists again, and landlords. All so this chaotic coalition can whine that they're not being treated nicely while they dismantle the country around us.
Hello there. For those of you that didn't see it on Facebook before we start today's video, I'd just like to let you know that I'm finally back in my wheelchair 4 days a week. And I've been taking the opportunity to organise a very special live show, and it will feature some of our friends from the Labour Party. So, if there's any particular people you want to see on this show, or in the future shows that come, let us know in the comments below wherever you are watching, if you didn't see our original post on Facebook. Now on to today's topic. Today's topic is how national tax cuts affect the disabled and elderly community. First of all, the elderly community, where Barbara Edmonds has been appearing on media platforms and online outlets, saying that she has received calls and emails from pensioners saying that their tax cut of around $2 may force some of their constituents to lose their homes. So that's no good. I didn't realise when National said we are the government for all Kiwis that they meant all Kiwis in the elderly community possibly losing their home anyway. So yeah, and on the disabled side, we get nothing because most of us are beneficiaries and we can't get a job, even though, again, Nicola will tell everyone to hashtag get a job. And even if we wanted to get a job, there aren't enough out there anyway. So yeah, not great for the tax cuts for the disabled or the elderly.
Hello there, kia ora. Let me just add a little bit of context to what Blake is saying there. The number of people who are going to have pretty much no impact at all from these tax cuts, well, it's more than the number of people who live in Gisborne and Whanganui and Upper Hutt combined. In fact, the number of people who are going to be worse off with these tax changes is about the same as the population of Gore. But you're not going to hear about those people this weekend because Smugfest 2024, the National Party Conference, is on in South Auckland at the moment, where they're crowing about the number of people who are doing really, really well under their tax changes. Like for some reason they were telling people, or giving the impression the money's just going to magically appear in their account, when that's clearly not how these things work, but that's just the weird way that they were promoting it, because these people are weird. Yeah. In fact, you want to know more about how weird they are? That's the next newsletter I'm writing on, is how weird are our right-wing politicians. But that's something to worry about on Friday. When it comes to tax changes, though, one of the things that doesn't change is the amount of money people get in benefits. And this is actually because of an imaginary number. You see, the benefits themselves are paid with tax having already been taken out of it. But instead of paying tax on it directly and then moving it to another part of the government, they just don't pay that money directly to the people who get the benefits. Which sounds kind of weird, but essentially it's to stop it from double dipping. So the people who are on any kind of benefit at the moment, with the exception of super, hey, thanks for checking out this week's Omnibus edition. There's a lot to get through in there in this week's Omnibus edition. So yeah, it's a lot of time. I hope you just made a cup of tea in the background, let the video play, that kind of stuff. But if you're a little bit concerned about everything that's going on and want to do something a little bit positive, let me just finish off by pointing out that nominations are now open for the New Zealander of the Year Awards. These are fantastic ways of being able to thank people for helping out in different ways. And yeah, they have a big New Zealander of the Year award that's been run by some amazing people, but they also do local heroes. And I think it's really important that we celebrate the local heroes that we can. So you can find a link to that, or just type in Local Hero Awards or New Zealander of the Year Awards into Google. It'll come up with everything that you need. Go and nominate somebody in your community who does amazing work, because they're the people that deserve the recognition more than politicians or people on YouTube videos sitting there telling you how terrible the government is. Please go and make sure you find someone in your community who does amazing things and support them and show the world and the rest of the country just how amazing they are. Look, until next week, have a fantastic rest of your day, and I will catch you guys all later.